Hey everybody, it's Clint with the Ivy League Trucker on a snowy day here in the Northeast. Today, we're going to listen to an interview with Robert. Robert is a Gen Z law school student. He has great insights about his generation, my generation, and everything in between. Let's have a listen. Today, I'm here with Robert. Full disclosure, Robert's my nephew. Hey, Robert, how you doing today?
Doing all right. How about you?
Good. We're having a big snow event here in the Northeast today in late January, so a rare time for Clint the trucker to be home, and also this is the first recording we're kinda doing in the online studio, so we'll see if the voice quality on both sides is better. So, Robert, just give a quick introduction to folks out there, like who you are, and what's going on in your life.
Yeah. So I'm Robert. I'm a law student at the moment. It is a not quite a second career, but I did spend some time in the nonprofit sector before going back to school. But that was always the plan, was to go back to school. So I'm in the process of trying to become a lawyer, and I'm about halfway done with it. I'm really enjoying it so far.
Sounds good. You single, married, kids? What?
So I'm engaged. My fiance is a teacher, and we are procrastinating planning our wedding, but we are engaged and we're looking forward to eventually getting married once we're once we're both done with the schooling that we got to do and all that. It's just too much on the brain, you know?
Yeah, there you go. So, what do you like to do for fun?
Yeah, so I'm definitely having less fun than I used to with law school, but I'm when I'm alone, I like to play video games. When I'm with friends, Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering, all the nerdy stuff really. But, I also just love trying new restaurants. I'm very into bartending,
Okay.
trying out new cocktails, things like that.
Sounds cool. If someone were to say, like, what are the things that are most important to you?
Mm. Well, there's the obvious initial, my family, my friends, the people that are directly in my life every day that
Yeah.
I see every day that are just cornerstone people in my lives. So, like my fiance, a huge example. But the looser, kind of more nebulous side of what's really important to me, in the more ideological what's important to me things, is mostly just justice, fairness, and a very profound sense of anger when I see things that don't feel right to me.
Well, tell me about that. Can you give me an example?
Yeah, so I mean, unfortunately this veers into politics if we're going to talk about this, but I'm oftentimes one of the more left-leaning people in any given room I'm in, so I get very frustrated with the state of things. Just like what's going on in Minneapolis right now is very frustrating to me,
Okay.
and it creates a lot of anger, and that's something I struggle with, is not bringing that anger to other places.
Okay. Well, that's good self-awareness on that part. Yeah, and for the record, frustrated with what's going on in Minneapolis. Like, Robert and I probably come from the different sides of the bell curve on the politics,
Mhm.
but how things are being happening in Minneapolis against the goal is very frustrating to me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. What, you guys wanna have kids?
Yeah, the current argument is 1 or 2. She was an only, so she definitely has a little bit more, didn't love being an only. I grew up in a very big family, so I'm kind of okay with the idea of maybe having a slightly smaller one. Um, but, uh but, so that's kind of the debate, is not if, but how many and when.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the question, really.
Hey, can I ask you a personal question about that? As a 62-year-old, you know, upper middle class guy historically, I see this generation, there's a lot of folks saying they don't wanna have kids. I perceive it to be much more than when I was your age.
Mhm.
So, what's your perception of all that, and what do you think about that?
I do agree that people are in our generation want kids less, generally.
So why?
Um I think that some of it comes from just a deep sense of fear and instability. Like, no matter where you fall on the political spectrum, this is just a weird time at the moment. everybody agrees it's a weird time, and weird
Yeah.
times don't really encourage what we think of as stability, the homeownership, families, and having kids. It's just you kind of want to wait for things to get normal before you try to do normal things.
Okay.
Um, I'll also say cost of living is just really up.
Yeah.
Uh,
True.
it's just harder to have kids these days. That I think part of it is, there's we could go on and on about the social media problem where we're all more connected but less deeply, and people are having a harder time building these deep relationships. They're having a harder time transitioning from like a crush to an actual marriage.
Wait, tell me more about that. Like,
Yeah. Okay.
what do you mean by that? To go from crush to actual marriage?
So I think that it's very common for people in our generation to have relatively shallow, short relationships.
Okay.
Um, I think part of that is that we're afraid of going into those deeper next level things because of the economic conditions, because of the political instability, blah, blah, blah. So we're afraid to move on to those next steps. That's part of it.
Okay.
Another thing is we spend so much time on social media connecting with so many different people, and we're seeing what our friends from high school are up to, and we're all comparing ourselves all the time, and we're comparing our significant others to the women we see on the internet and the men we see on the internet. And we get these TikToks on our feed talking about how a boyfriend's supposed to behave, how a girlfriend's supposed to behave. And you start feeling like disappointed because this woman with the rich husband bought her he bought her a fancy purse for Christmas, and my boyfriend got me a much, much less expensive item, and why am I
Wow.
not being treated like the queen that I am, and blah, 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 and it's just like, well, you're both broke. And I think that people just get frustrated from what they see and what they don't have, and that is not just in items and jobs and economic conditions, but also in relationships and love.
Wow. Sounds exhausting.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Wow. So, do you like if you're king? What do you, is there a solution to that? I mean, let's start personally, not societally. Like, is there a solution to that or not?
I mean, personally, I think the first step is self-awareness.
Okay.
Just realizing that the thing that you're looking at isn't always real, isn't always meant for you, isn't something that's achievable for you. Like, you see these trad wives on the internet that
What's a trad wife for the audience?
uh, yeah, sorry, a traditional wife. There's a whole brand of person on the internet that markets themselves as a very traditional stay-at-home that does the baking and blah, 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 and
Yeah.
cooks everything, and
Yeah.
it's a fine thing to want to do that, but there is a brand of it, of people who get paid to sell it as idyllic, and
Uh-huh.
people who watch it as this thing that they think is beautiful and perfect and dreamy, but that's because this person on TikTok is only showing you the best moments. They're showing you the the bread that they made with the locally sourced
Right.
wheat and the
It's got
milk from their own cow, but they're not showing you milking the cow.
right. It's got the
Um,
limitations, the natural dysfunctional limitations of social media, which is
yeah,
people just like, for example, when Robert's cousin, my daughter, was
mhm,
having a rough time once, my wife and I looked at her Facebook, and it looked like everything was fine, but we
yeah,
knew she was struggling,
yeah,
on a personal level with something, so it's you don't show the crap.
yeah, yeah, and not showing the crap meets this thing where you get these young people that think they're seeing real life, and they're not seeing real life. It's not any more real than reality TV.
Right,
It has a veneer of reality, and they give you peeks behind the screen to make it feel real. But if
right,
you know you are being marketed to, then you stop going like, "Oh, why is my girlfriend not doing that for me? Why is my boyfriend not doing this for me?" It's because that's their brand. They're getting paid to act in this way
right,
through you watching this content.
right.
Um, and once you know that everything you see online is branding and marketing, even the small creators are still trying to there's a reason they're posting.
You have an objective. Yeah,
Selling it.
yeah.
Yeah. And
So
once you get over that, it helps with, not getting frustrated by what you see that's different.
so let's take this back to, like, you. Like, I mean, do you consumption of the content, or you just think you have a better read of what's going on?
Man, I could be way better about limiting my consumption of content.
Mm,
I try to
yeah,
be better about the type of content I consume, I will say.
mhm. Okay, okay,
Um, I really try to actually avoid hyper political TikTok content. I really try to avoid that the like influencer side of the internet. I try to just kind of stick to my little nerdy hobbies and watch
okay,
YouTube videos about Magic the Gathering and and like there's nothing to harm me there. It's just
sure.
indulgent. But I probably spend too much time on social media and YouTube.
So so you're studying law.
Mhm.
Take yourself, like, 5 and 10 years out. What do you wanna be accomplishing? What do you wanna be contributing and doing?
So 5 years out, I just want to be kind of getting my feet under me with really learning the ins and outs of trust and estates and other kind of related family issues. I'm very interested in where economic factors meet the family.
Okay,
So, real estate transactions, wills, creating trusts to preserve just that little bit of wealth. There's a lot of interesting stuff that happens around there with disability, where you maybe create trusts to support a disabled child.
okay, okay,
Things like that are very interesting to me. Long term, I wanna kinda be a I wanna one day have my own firm.
okay.
That would be the dream, and really kinda do everything family. Where money meets family, that's what I wanna do.
Where money meets family, and I will
Mhm.
just say Robert is someone who has great integrity in his passions, his values, and what he's doing with his life, and which is to your credit.
Thank
Um,
you.
and I just see a throughput there that, he cares about justice, and he cares about family, and he cares about people, and I see that resonating there,
Mhm.
in on the legal side. So, are there other parts of I mean, where are you in law school? Near the front, the back, or what?
Halfway through.
Halfway.
Um Yeah, and I mean, there's definitely other things in law that get me closer to my like idea of justice and things like that. But one of the
Mhm.
problems is I need to find how to help people as much as I can while doing what
Right.
I'm good at. And what I'm good at isn't arguing in a courtroom. It is writing contracts and negotiating, and I'm much better at that than I am with in the courtroom. So, I'm trying to also kind of pursue justice and goodness and helping people without while still playing to my strength because, you don't want a bad public defender. You want a public defender who's good at being a public defender.
Yeah, yeah. Basic competence and efficacy, come first in any pursuit. Uh,
Exactly, yeah, so I'm not gonna force myself into something that I feel as more justice oriented if I know I won't do well at it.
okay. I'm gonna switch gears here. Do you
Mm.
think you're, like, broadly representative of your age group, or do you think you're an outlier?
I think I'm a bit of an outlier.
How so? How so? How so?
Well, I would say one of the biggest differences is just like the economic reality of my situation. I've been incredibly lucky, both with like family support from like I'm not graduating law school with an absolute pile of debt.
Okay.
I talk to my friends that are my age, and they talk about having hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans, and they talk about that they'll never own a home, that they like can't even think about settling down, starting a family, having kids because everything's just too expensive.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I'm going to law school on a scholarship and, like, I am paying for it's still expensive and it's still a big cost on my life, but it's not going to be something that completely upends my life because and the way that I think most of my generation is deeply in debt and is really struggling to find a place for themselves. So I
Mhm.
think that's the biggest difference between me and the rest of my generation is I have a lot more economic comfort, I would say.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and then I think that like, I'm also highly educated and I'm only getting more educated because of this. So that does create also a difference between those who don't have the opportunities that I've had.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
yeah, but
Okay.
I think in general, like my generation is a I think a lot of the things I said about like frustration about the current political situation, frustration about the current economic situation are real things that most people in my generation feel. And I think I've got that in common with them. I might just think about it a little differently.
Right, and are you're Gen Z?
I am Gen Z. I'm on the old end of Gen Z. I always think of the dividing line between Gen Z and millennial as whether or not you remember 9/11. I
I
find
know.
that to be kind of the useful metric.
There you go. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so speaking of generations and that sort of thing, kinda jumping off of that one, do you think there's like, say if you like, I'm 62, right? Now, I'm your uncle, so, we know each other, but let's pretend we're not related. What do you think, like, the dimensions of the divide, like, socially, how people think or anything like that? Do you think there's a big divide between my generation and your generation, or do you think maybe not?
I think that the divide exists, but I think that also the divide kind of shrinks once people enter the workforce,
Tell me about
and
tell
once
me
they get a little bit older. And I think this is true of every generation, by the way. I think that like the boomers, when they were hippies, had a massive divide between them and their parents, and then they got jobs.
Right,
And I think that a big part of that, and I don't think that getting a job means like you have to sell out and you have to like give up your dreams and you have to stop being like a politically active person or you have to stop being a like the type of person you were before you get the job. But you just end up in a room with other people that are older than you, and you have to learn how to talk to them. And you have to learn that we have more in common than we don't because we're all people and we all have the same fundamental basic needs.
right.
Um,
Tell me about
but
that. How did that play for you? Like, you worked in some smaller organizations
Mhm.
before you went to law school, kind of the college to now thing. Did you go through that, having to learn to talk to older people in the workplace? Was that a thing, or
Yeah, and I mean, I'm still doing it. Every time I go to a networking event for law school, I'm talking to somebody who's twice my age, and learn what they're about. And you get better at it. But I think that when I first graduated undergrad, and I got a job at an immigration nonprofit, and pretty much all of the upper leadership were 40s plus.
Uh-huh.
A
Okay.
good chunk of the upper leadership was even older than that. A lot of people I watched a lot of people that I worked with retire during the 3 years I worked there. So, like, there was a lot of people in the retirement age bracket. And I think I think you go into these it's normal to go into conversations with people expecting something, where I went into these conversations expecting to talk to these people and think of them as more conservative, slower, older, more careful, more,
Well, we are
um
we are slower. I'll validate that one.
but, like, and but you have conversations with these people, and you realize that, 1, they were just like you when you were when they were your age. 2, this is what you will be when you're their age. Like, we all slow down I was at a nonprofit that was helping immigrants get healthcare, so it was definitely a pretty progressive space all around.
Right, yeah.
So when I say, like, they were like me when I was there when they were my age, I'm gonna be like them when I'm their age, I really mean that in every sense of the word, because we didn't have also all those additional big gaps in, like, I believe in this, you believe in that. I'm this religion, you're that religion. Like, we all had a lot in common
Mm,
already, that nonprofit. So that
right,
made bridging that generational gap a lot easier because the only
mhm,
thing we were all that different on was age.
right.
Um, it's harder when you start layering on these other things. Of course, like if you go to church and you're talking to the 20 something year old at your church,
Right,
you're you're already on the same playing field. You already
right.
came to this place for the same reasons. You're already attracted to the same ideas,
Yeah, you
you know.
both self-selected kind of religiously and maybe not ideologically, but at least religiously.
Yes, yeah.
So there's yeah, that's just human nature to kinda end up in rooms of folks kinda like
Mhm.
you. Kind of related, so
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think most of the time when we are interacting with people that are a different age from us, unless they're complete strangers, there's always something that you have in common. Like the people at the law firm that I'm doing an internship with at, we're all interested in trust and estates. We're all there for the same reason. We all have the
mhm,
same, like, I want to help people get their wills sorted out.
right.
We always have that in common. And one of the guys there lives in the same town as me, and we talk restaurants every time we see each other, just because,
Mhm.
like, we know we have that in common, and it's not that hard to just find something you have with somebody else.
Is that
Um,
a technique that you do, just try to find something in common pretty quickly?
yeah, I would say so. Yeah, you always got to find that one link that makes it a little bit easier to just be like, if we've got nothing else, we can always talk about this. You
Yeah,
know,
gotcha.
movies, music, anything like that tends to be pretty good starting point, I would say.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
So, kinda sticking with this intergenerational thing, what do you think, like, for you personally, what are the most important things you've learned from my generation?
Hard work for sure. I think that the I think your generation does tend to work a little harder than my generation, but I also maybe mean that in a negative way, in the sense that I think maybe my generation wants a work life balance a little more. So maybe we learned hard work and also learned that hard work isn't always the end all be all of everything.
Okay.
Um, but I think watching the way that your generation has navigated the workplace and how that affects everything outside of it in your life and what you bring home from work has actually been a very big thing for me, because it's helped me make the decisions of what I want to do with my life, what I want to do with my marriage, how I want to raise my kids and things like that.
Okay.
Both in dramatically positive and dramatically negative ways, but I would say that's one of the big ones.
Okay.
And maybe I'm just thinking too much about work right now because I'm in the process of, like, applying for
Well,
summer internships, but
it's what's in front of your nose right now.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
that's natural. What do you think so if you were go like, critique us, um,
Mhm.
like, what do you think is some stuff that our generation doesn't do very well or maybe you wanna do better?
What do I wanna do better? That's generation wide. Okay, let me think. One thing that you see with the older generation, and I honestly think it's a generation even older than you,
Okay.
but and I think it's starting to die out, but the way that some men talk about their wives, the old ball and chain, stuff like that, I
Yeah.
think that needs to die.
Tell me more about that.
I think it's one of just the most harmful dynamics that you can have in a relationship is just allowing resentment to exist to a point that it becomes a joke. When resentment exists in your relationship, you either need to end that relationship or you need to end the resentment. And when I hear older men or see older men on the internet, like, complain about their wives, or I see it with younger men sometimes too, where they talk about their, like, bitch girlfriends. I'm like, so break up with her. Like, you're not happy. And I see it, and you see it with girls on the internet talking about their boyfriends, and then as soon as somebody in the comments say, "Oh, break up with him," then they leap to his defense. But I think that a lot of the I think that attitude of my wife is a limiting factor on my life is horrible, and I think that that's one of the biggest problems I've seen of the older generation, at least, like, how I've interacted with outside of the family. Like, when I worked
Yeah.
at restaurants and I would talk to the regulars and they'd complain about their wives, and it's just like, yeah, I don't know. That's always been a point of frustration for me.
Gosh, is it
Um,
yeah, for my wife and I remember when I was early on in the marriage, trying to make a covenant with myself to not criticize my wife when she wasn't around, and
mhm,
I think I'm pretty good at that, and but I did see I think it goes just to the broader thing of, like, how you talk about people when they're not around.
yeah,
Uh, it's kind of a character thing, but it doesn't mean we didn't have a lot of, conflicts and I didn't fail her in many ways, but that was inside the house of our marriage, and it was just unfair for me to criticize her. She's not around.
But I think it's not just the not around thing, it's
Mhm.
also just what it says about the relationship as a whole.
No, that's
Like
fair. That's fair. Yeah.
yeah, like, because I think that we talked about this a little bit earlier where, you guys struggled with some stuff during your transformation into the Ivy League trucker, but you guys worked through it. You guys didn't silo off into your own sections and just let resentment build. You chose not to let it build. You chose to handle it. And
Yeah.
you guys chose to stay together, really.
Yeah. No, we definitely did. And I would say, I I had to repent of
Mhm,
behaviors, or she probably would not have stayed with me. I mean, there had to be change. There
mhm.
had to be both heart change, but also behavioral change. And I'll just put it out there. It's yeah, it's if I had continued to do the behaviors which had hurt our relationship, it would have eventually totally wrecked it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's that I had to repent, and I'm spent a lot of time in the truck thinking about what repentance is and what it means.
Mhm.
Uh, so let's flip over to the younger generation. What's like your big? You said maybe not work as hard, but you have any particular critique of your generation and how it relates to the older generation?
Oh, my generation's just panicky.
Like how so?
We we are not we worry so much. We bring that energy into everything. We bring it into conversations like this. We bring it into conversations about politics. We bring it into money. It's one of the reasons we're not having kids. And it affects our relationships with our parents because our parents want us to be steady and able to move on and ready to begin building our own lives, and we're scared to build our own lives. Um
You think that's endemic to your generation, like, historically more than average?
No, no. I think that maybe our generation's doing it for longer than average. I think that, but
Okay.
I mean, I think that's partially just, we are in school longer. It takes us longer to be homeowners. It takes us longer to have kids. But I think everybody panicked and was terrified before their wedding, before they had kids, before their first job, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Just think we're stuck in it a little longer. And yeah,
You think it's in this extended adolescence concept, or it's more the overall environment?
both. I think extended adolescence is why we are keeping it for longer. I
Uh-huh.
think the overall environment encourages it, and that brings us back to, like, social media and, like, what we see.
Right.
Like, we have more to panic about because we're bombarded with bad things all the time. You open up your phone and you
Yeah.
see a dead body, like,
Doom
it's
scroll, the
yeah,
whole doom scrolling. Yeah, there was
yeah,
not doom scrolling when I was your age. So
yeah.
that and it's and also you can make the argument that your generation and people slightly younger than you, they had the financial crisis of '08, '09 when they saw parents losing houses and losing jobs, and then they got screwed over by COVID and school.
Mhm,
You're a little bit on the older side, but, like, people younger than just a little
mhm,
younger than you, they had to do college and high school with COVID and the
yeah,
isolation, and then last 2 or 3 years has been a horrible job market to graduate into, and then social media. So you put it all together, and it's kinda like, I get it. They would be anxious, they would be worried. Let me ask you about this concept, it's kinda related. Like, our generation kinda says, "Heck, you just have the kid get married and have the kids, and you do life." Whereas my perception anyway is your generation is much more, I have to have things squared away more professionally, financially before I have kids. Is that a fair assessment?
oh yeah, I think that's a completely accurate read on our generation, and I believe that. I am in that second boat where I'm 27. I want to have kids before I'm too old to, like, enjoy the time in my life after they go to college. Um, but, like, I don't wanna have kids while I'm struggling to figure out what my life is going to look like outside of those kids. Like, I need to finish law school, I need to get my job, I need to, like, I don't need to have my whole nest egg settled, but I need to just make sure that I'm not gonna be, like, homeless, and homeless with an infant sounds so much worse, you know?
Yeah, that's fair. It's interesting because, like, from a, like, milestone perspective on it,
Mhm,
like, and I think about me and my peers, I graduated from college at 21. I've got a
Mhm.
decent paying job in the military. I bought a house before I even got married. Like,
Yeah.
it was a cheap house, but I bought a house because was in Pensacola in flight school. The house cost $42,000, but I was making about 29,000. So
Yeah.
so the house was only 1 point, like, 4 times my income, you
Mhm.
know? And then, military, there's a lot of kinda programming in the military and everything. You go down these paths. And then, you know, I was in the MBA program to kinda lever up the income while the first 2 children came along. And then but at age 30, I bought the big house, you
Yeah.
know? And, of course, we renovated and made it better, but I was 30 years old, almost 31. I had taken the good paying job post MBA
Mhm.
and had 2 kids, in the household, and then the other one came later, and so I'm, like, 32, and all these things were kinda nailed down, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I think listening to what you're saying, those things are getting nailed down much later.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I mean, I'm gonna finish law school at 29, or well, I'll be 29 by the time I finish taking the bar,
Got it.
and then I'm gonna be looking at those things. It's gonna take me a while, and, it's gonna just take me longer to get it nailed down, and one thing I'd be curious about is that first house you bought when you were fresh out of college is how much that same house would cost now, and I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, there's no doubt, especially post pandemic, massive issue on the run up in real estate. I mean, real estate
Mhm.
nationally average from 2019 to 2026 is up 50%. That is 50% in
Mhm.
5 years-ish, and that
Oh,
has
yeah.
almost never happened in American history. That is like an epochal event.
Yeah.
Um, and if you look at the ratio of just your income to the price of the house, so
Mhm.
making like 30,000 a year, and I bought a house for 42,000 as a
Mhm.
single guy. Now that same house today in Pensacola is only worth about 180, but that's 4x
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
35 years. But you look at, like, the localities here in the Philly metro area where we're at, you can't touch you could touch a starter but even a starter house is like 350, you
Oh, yeah,
know?
I was looking at some, townhouses in, like when I was fresh out of college and I was working, and I was thinking about whether or not I was gonna go to law school or if I was gonna stick it out in this nonprofit career and whether or not I could do it. And I was living in Manayunk, and I started looking at the houses around me, and some of them were in okay condition. So I was like, all right, what would be I don't have the handyman skills to do a true fixer upper, but I was like, all right, what if I bought an okay place, small, whatever, what would that take me? 300,000. I would need for like 42 for the down payment. The like just to even like get it
Yeah, the
just to have a reasonable mortgage rate.
cash you get to the table, yeah, and then, that's the other thing, that has really constrained the real estate market is all the people my age who should be trading out of their big houses and selling them to your generation or slightly older than you, like 35-year-olds, we're holding on to our houses because interest rates are high,
Yeah. Mhm.
and that constrains supply, which drives up price. It's just a real perfect storm of problem on the real estate side, and the other thing is the country has not built from the 2008-9 financial crisis to present, which is like 15, 16 years. We have underbuilt versus basic population demand. So you
Yeah.
got not enough inventory, then it's constrained by this whole interest rate environment for intergenerational transfer. It's a
Mhm.
it's kind of a shitstorm for you guys.
Honestly, one thing I think is gonna be fascinating just from like a trust and estates position, I mean, what I'm studying in law school is that at some point that group of people you were just talking about, the people who are refusing to sell their house and because the interest rate is high, there's gonna be a massive transfer of wealth
Yeah, there's an
when
article in the Wall
the
Street
people are
Journal
gonna
about
start
this
dying.
this week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm curious what that's gonna look like in the field of housing, because I feel like a lot of those houses are gonna get transferred to people who can't afford the house that they're getting. Maybe their parents, like, die with the home fully paid off, but maybe not enough in the bank account to do, like, as much as they'd like with the upkeep,
Yeah.
and we're gonna have a whole lot of really expensive houses that need to get sold to a generation of people that don't have the money to buy them,
Well, that's a supply and
and
demand
that's gonna
thing.
be interesting.
Well, I mean, simplistically, it could crash price, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you know, it could you could see something like that. I don't know. Um,
It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I don't really have a good prediction, but I just that transfer of wealth and how it will affect housing is definitely gonna be massive for my generation and getting onto the home ownership bracket, or it'll completely destroy the economy, and we'll find out.
yeah. Um, Let me ask, so we talked about kind of the intergenerational stuff and values and situations. If you I'm gonna go to kind of a tactics and techniques sort of thing.
Mm,
If you talked about in the workplace,
mhm.
but if you run into folks, can be anybody, I guess, but older generation that you're just like, you have to work with them. It may not
Yeah.
be in a professional workplace situation, but you gotta interact with them, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, more so than just, I don't know, small talk, while you're waiting for your flight to go.
Yeah,
Um,
somebody you have a continuing relationship with.
yeah,
You're gonna see them several times, yeah.
yeah. Is there anything advice you can give the audience for, like, speak to your generation, that's who you're talking to, and you're trying to give them advice on interacting with the old folks. Is there anything you would say?
Ugh. So I've got 2 sideways pieces of I've got 2 kind of avenues of advice for different types of people in my generation.
Alright, go for it.
Um, One is it's not your job to fix them. A lot of people in my generation have this idea like, everybody you've seen those Facebook posts about like the drunk Trumpy uncle that is like that gets a little out of hand and like the liberal cousin that's like, I'm gonna prove them wrong. And it's like that's not your job. You're not gonna change their mind. They're not gonna change your mind. You're both gonna just talk past each other.
Okay.
And you're both gonna be happier if you just don't have that conversation at all. And, like, especially in the workplace, it's not your job to convince people to believe what you believe, especially when they're not going to believe it. And I think that this can apply way wider than just politics as well. You don't always have to, you don't need the older people to know how to rotate a PDF. You can just rotate the PDF for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right, right, right.
There's just fights not worth fighting.
Okay.
Um, and it's knowing when to actually engage in a learning experience versus just letting it be is a big thing that I think my generation could improve on.
Alright, that's good. Yeah. The other thing.
Now I'm trying to remember the other thing if I'm gonna be honest.
It's
Oh, the
okay.
other thing is just, like, being more kind, honestly.
Alright,
If
give
you lead with kindness, people respond with kindness,
can you
and
give me an example of that you did that?
let me think. So I worked with some older people at my old job, and I always went out of my way to not just ask them, like, what I needed to ask them about, like, the job, like, I'm calling them because I need this thing for this conference, I'm calling them because I need this picture from this event that they went to for a social media post or a blog post or XYZ, and you're just gonna have a much better time if you just take the 5 minutes to say, "Hey, how are you? How was it? Oh my god, how are your kids doing, by the way?" And just
Little
taking the time
social greetings.
to yeah, it just small talk really is actually important, and it's actually good. Um, and I know, like, a lot of people hate small talk, and they wanna just skip over it, but it really is vital to just having a pleasant workplace experience, and when you need something, they're more likely to help you if you're the nice person that asks them questions about themselves.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, that's empathy. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And it can be self-serving even, like, you don't have like, I think some people in my generation that are, like, so afraid of the way that things are happening now are kind of, like, going full self-serving mode to try to maximize their success. Like,
Mhm.
there's a lot of young boys on the internet that seem to admire, Patrick Bateman from American Psycho, as weird as that is, because they see him as the successful sociopath. If you don't care about anybody else and just focus on your own success, you will succeed.
It's
And
kinda
that's just not how it actually works.
no, it is not.
Yeah, like, you have to still be kind and you still have to talk to people, and and unless you have the luck of being set up in an area where you're, like, already the boss at a very young age and can just boss everybody around, you have to work your way up in things, and you don't work your way up by being a jerk.
No, you don't. You don't,
Yeah.
'cause yeah, sometimes karma's not instant, but it's usually happens.
Yeah,
Um,
and in the grand scheme, some people have enough money to escape it, but, like
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I would just say, there was a guy who said, "Treat others as you'd like to be treated." Oh, right.
Mm.
That guy.
Yeah.
That guy from Nazareth.
Yeah.
Um, well, I think we've kinda covered the waterfront. Do you have any parting thoughts on our conversation about this? Like, the audience is gonna be probably probably a little bit more folks in my generation, maybe, I don't know. But
Mhm.
any parting thoughts for folks before we wrap this thing up on a snow day?
Then I'll talk to that generation about talking to my generation because 'cause I've mostly talked about how my generation
Okay, okay.
thinks about these things, and it's just I think that my generation so Gen Z is actually, statistically with IQ scores, and I have my own issues with whether and how accurate IQ is as a measurement and all that, but
Right.
statistically, we are the smartest generation that's ever lived, and it's the first and every generation's been smarter than the one before it. Until Gen Alpha. Gen Alpha is the first generation that scores lower on IQ scores than the generation before it.
Yeah, I heard something about
Um,
that the other day too with, maybe correlating it to screens in the educational environment.
yeah, maybe some yeah, and who knows why and yeah, but
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think that what I wanna get to with that is that when you're talking to young people and they're having a hard time and they're getting panicky and they're being emotional and they're having a hard time, like, expressing what they're trying to express and they're doing those things I was talking about where they're clearly a little bit afraid and they maybe don't know how to talk to older people. Just remember that like they are smart people. They're just having a hard time. And that it's okay for people to be having a hard time and to be scared. And like it's also good to lead with kindness when you're talking with young people where you're not getting anything out of them and they don't have anything to offer you career wise or politically or economically or anything like that. But it's still important to just like make them feel heard and you might actually learn something.
Well, I've certainly learned some things in the last 45 minutes, that's for sure. Well, thank you, Robert. Cool conversation, and, I would just love to have the same conversation with anyone in your generation to see what they care about, and, I mean, hell, you are the future.
Yeah.
Well
Unfortunately.
well, God bless,
Okay.
we'll see if any of us are working tomorrow here in the Northeast because it's the storm of the century, they say. It doesn't look that bad out my window, but I don't think anybody's going anywhere in the next probably 18 hours.
Yeah,
So,
it's more snow than I've seen in a while, but it's pretty light snow, luckily, but
yeah, and I think the
it
ice on the
keeps
back
coming.
end could be the issue. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, God bless. Take care, Robert. We'll see you on the flip side.
Alright, thank you.
All right, bye. Well, that was a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed talking to Robert and have enjoyed seeing him grow and mature into the young man that he is. He's an impressive dude. So I think the assignment out of today would be if you're in my generation, north of 50, try to proactively have a conversation with somebody in Gen Z, under 30, and have the objective be to draw them out about what's going on with them, uh, and try to apply the probing questions and listening just to seek to understand, not to judge, not to give advice, not to do any of that, just to seek to understand. In the words of Maya Angelou, they never remember what you said, they only remember how you made them feel. Till next time, shiny side up.